Psst, we finally learn an interesting piece of Terry's past. Stay tuned. Hello friends, welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. And if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. I think you're going to enjoy what we do here, where we go back and look at cartoons and movies and comics that we grew up on in the 80s and 90s, and maybe drink a little coffee while we're at it. So if this sounds like something you might enjoy, hop below, hit the subscribe button, click like, share it with a friend, because today we're talking about the episode Big Time, which originally aired on October 7th, 2000.
Guys, this is Charlie Big Time Bigelow.
I think the highlight of this episode is that we finally get to learn a little bit more about Terry's past. We find out why he was in juvenile hall and some of his past relationships and kind of the path that he used to be on, and how extra important it was that Bruce came into his life to kind of take him off of this life of crime. And we learn all about that in this episode. But before we get into all that, I'm going to give you the 60-second Beyond Bomb rundown. We got our Mad Stand bomb up on the clock. Give you a quick rundown, everything that happened in the episode before that bomb goes off. Here we go. We open up on some chemicals getting stolen by a gang and some trucks, and Batman tries to stop him and is unsuccessful, and then he's talking with Bruce on the phone, and Bruce is going, oh yeah, that's some chemical for growth hormones to help plants grow, and he's interrupted by hearing Dana struggling with somebody, and he goes over there, oh, it's Big Time, somebody from his past, and Big Time's talking to him, and he's going, hey, I got this great new score, I want to get you on all that. Oh, why haven't you changed? I'm on a different path, Terry says, and he goes, well, you don't understand. Oh, listen, let me help you out. I got this guy, Bruce, that can probably give you a good job. Really? You sure? Okay. He calls and pulls a few strings and gets him the security job. Oh, wow, thank you. And he goes in there and he's at the security and he has a security guard push on the thing because he needs a disc, and he gets the handprints. And meanwhile, Bruce is doing some investigation. He goes, oh, you know what? He works for the competitor, the chemical company is the person that he shared a cell with. So I think this might be why he's, oh boy, he tricked me. And so he goes in there and they use the handprints, and Terry struggles with him a little bit, but he puts a tracer on him and he shows up the thing, and it blows up, and then he ends up getting boy, I think I'd be better by now. And he shows up and they struggle, and he gets splashed with this chemicals because Terry showed up, and then he starts growth hormones because starts getting bigger, and he goes, oh, now I'm on top of the world, rawr, Hulk strong. And he goes in there, and then so he goes, the people that he was working for, the criminals backstabbing him, goes, oh, you gotta owe us money because you sabotaged that heist. And so there's this final showdown, and Big Time gets away, and then or he doesn't get away, he gets arrested, and then Dana's talking to Terry and going, boy, look, boy, you know, it could have been you getting arrested. Good thing you were off that path, but it still hurts. Not as much as a bomb going off in your face.
Stop sweating, McGinnis. You're off the hook. Life goes on.
I did really enjoy this opening sequence with the trucks and the chase and the battling and the moving scenery and the rockets. But it is...
This is where you get off.
But I couldn't help, as I was watching it, to notice some similarities to The Dark Knight, which obviously this came out first, so I have to wonder if Christopher Nolan borrowed some of this sequence for The Dark Knight, which also is a really great sequence. There's something about the trucks, and not that a truck chase scene is anything unique, but the side doors that open up and the rockets and the, bang and all that is just, it was very reminiscent. I just have to wonder, or if it's just one of those things that he had seen at some point, or they both came to this idea at the same time. But in either case, it was a very enjoyable sequence to kind of jump into the action.
You want it so bad, Batman?
However, it did feel a little bit into that formula that we've been talking about this season, where there's some crime happening, Batman shows up, fails to stop them, and then has to regroup and come back. And in this instance, it wasn't the villain that he was ultimately going to face, because we haven't introduced him yet, of Big Time. It was this other gang that's going to be interwoven into the story later. But again, I don't feel like that was really the focus of this episode. I think that more so what was interesting about this episode is that backstory and learning more about Terry's past.
You sure you're ready for the big time, kid?
And I think in doing that, it created some interesting dynamics. One, we get to see Terry kind of being a little bit evasive about his history, and we don't really learn why he doesn't want to talk about it until later on. And we bring in somebody from his past, and now he's integrated into the story rather than it being a villain from Bruce's past or from another, time before Terry. We actually have Terry directly involved in this history of this villain.
You only have that nice life because of me.
Which I think gives a great dynamics to him wanting to rehabilitate the villain, which is a very Batman Bruce Wayne kind of quality. And also struggling with doing the right thing. And in doing that, it creates him to, slip a little bit. And it is a little more trusting of this criminal than maybe he should have been. But again, it adds a great dynamic into the story and a great sort of, emotional struggle into the episode.
You had to check up on Charlie. My word wasn't good enough.
And it also makes for a really nice story when you have the kind of two-bit criminal trying to work his way up through this enterprise. And when Terry knew him, they were just both a couple of street rats trying to make ends meet. But now, after spending some time in the Slammer, Big Time is more on a path of like, I want to become the next big crime boss in Gotham. And I think those are kind of interesting stories. And we've seen that in old movies and dealing with mobsters and gangsters. And that's kind of a fun element.
This is the break I've been looking for, and it could have been our ticket to the big leagues.
And then you have the other side of that, of having Terry trying to help him out and trying to set him on a path of good, ultimately gets him this job, which leads him to kind of being played by this criminal.
You were always thinking small, Terry.
But I do have to say, the sequence where he is using, has the security guard help him move that computer and puts his handprint on there and he scans it and then gets a glove to gain access. That's a great trick. And I love that kind of tech that's used to kind of achieve this goal is always kind of interesting.
Piece of cake.
And of course, I think that it felt a little obvious that Big Time was going to turn into the supervillain and him trying to steal this growth hormone chemical. It was kind of a little bit predictable where it was going to go. But also, I don't feel like they've done those kind of stories a whole lot in Batman Beyond, as much as I would have expected them to, in terms of, we have a whole new world and a whole new set of rogues gallery that we need to establish. But there isn't as much of, this criminal's trying to do something goes wrong and he becomes a supervillain, and Batman's sort of to blame in that. Which they don't touch on a lot in this episode, which I would have liked to see more of them really establishing, having Terry feel that extra guilt of turning this once friend of his into this big monster. I felt like that was a little bit of a missed opportunity. They kind of touch on it, but it doesn't really go. It's more just the guilt that Terry feels of not being able to help his friend out.
Just stay away.
And then, of course, once we were established into the story, we finally get Terry telling his backstory. It feels a little forced of him kind of telling this story, but it works in the sense that we knew since the beginning of the show that there was some sort of history that Terry had. They mentioned before of him being in juvie, and now we find out why. And this is one of those plots that works out well, that they kind of established that early on and found the right opportunity by bringing in this other character from Terry's past to expose this truth about, the path that he was on and the guilt that he feels over him only getting a few months in juvie because he was a juvenile, and his friend who was tried as an adult and ended up going to prison for several years, feeling that guilt, which again kind of lays into kind of his own story of why he wants to be Batman and help stop crime and help criminals and things like that. And it's his own story versus just, Bruce is hiring me to do his bidding.
Next thing I knew, the cops were shouting freeze and I was doing 90 days in juvie.
I do have to say, one of the disappointments in this episode, which I'm kind of surprised that I'm even going to say, is that I thought that they had a great opportunity, this setup of creating this really, kind of a classic monster kind of a scenario with Big Time. and just sort of a brute force, hideous creature that he becomes. And I thought they really could have leaned into that monster movie element and have him more hidden in the shadows, and you just see the light swinging or the noir effects in the shadows and him thrashing around and doing that. And that's coming from me who I don't typically like those, those kind of exposing those kind of tropes or even the idea of, the monster movie kind of thing. And I talked about that in my Superman reviews of it just being kind of big monster versus Superman. But I thought this story and that moment where they finally reveal big time and they finally reveal that he is deformed and this creature, that I thought, boy, they really could have just leaned into that. They sort of just show him right off the bat. Of course, it is like late in the third act that they finally reveal him, so maybe they just wanted to get down to it and show him off.
At least now, I'm gonna get the respect I deserve.
But it is kind of a nice reveal at the end where we finally see Terry's guilt, which is kind of a unique sort of guilt. I said at the beginning that I wish they would have touched more on him feeling guilty of creating him as a monster. But it wasn't as much about that as it was him dealing with the guilt of, wow, that could have been me, and I couldn't do enough to help him to get on the right path. But it's a unique guilt to go, oh, look how I turned out, and I'm saved from this life of crime, versus my friend that just by circumstances, just by his age, ended up living a harder life, going to prison for 3 years, and is now set on a life of crime. And I like that. I think that's a neat kind of a story and a neat layer to Terry that is unique to Terry and not just borrowed from Bruce.
Yeah, lucky me.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, I kind of enjoyed it. I like it because it had more of this story in there and more revealing about Terry's past, and it felt more integrated into the other episodes that we've seen so far, and revealed another piece of Terry's past, which I always enjoy, rather than these kind of one-off episodes that's just, oh, bad guy comes in, Batman stops him, and then we move on about our lives. But in this, we actually have, we meet a character that, yeah, maybe it's not as interesting of a villain, it's just sort of a monster, but he has a great backstory, and he has a great connection to Terry, disconnected from the idea of Batman. So for all those reasons, it falls at the number 15 spot of my favorite episodes so far. Didn't quite make the cut into the top 10, but I do have it just falling below Once Burned because, as you can see in my review for that episode, I just felt like it was just there was an interesting dynamic in that episode that just kind of edged this one out a little bit more. And again, it tied into Terry's kind of personal struggles into that episode, but I felt like it was much better. I shouldn't say much better. It was better executed in that episode than in this one. But I do have this beating out the premiere episode of Rebirth because when I'm looking at these episodes and trying to rank them for Batman Beyond episodes, Rebirth does end up just being sort of an origin story. And this one kind of builds on that origin story and I think adds enough to it that this one, there's a lot of work that had to happen in Rebirth to kind of establish what was going on. So this one, we're already into it. We're well into the series that I felt like this one just kind of beat that one out in that sense.
This is your fault, Richie. Look what you did to me.
So my question for you is, what is your favorite monster movie? As we talked about kind of those classic monster movies in this episode and how they could have done that, I enjoy them for what they are, but certainly not my favorite genre of movies. And certainly when you look at, kind of the modern sort of monster movies, but those classic Frankenstein, Dracula, Mummy, King Kong, what's your favorite classic monster movie? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and share it with a friend. I always enjoy getting new people to discover this channel, and it always means a lot when I hear of you sharing these with people that you think would enjoy them as well. So I always appreciate that. And as always, you can click the like button to subscribe, and that helps out as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode, and I will see you soon.